Hi, my name is Mark Stevens, author of Adventures in Legal Land. My website is adventuresinlegalland.com, and I also do a radio show called the No State Project on the Republic Broadcast Network on every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Central Time. What I want to talk about today, spoken about it a bit on the radio show. I have an article. It's a standing cross-reference. Also, if you go to the website, there's an article about how bureaucrats never have a case. So what I want to discuss today is just standing in court. And I want to discuss just the criminal side, because the few critics that people have come out and said, "Oh, Mark is full of crap. Oh, that's ridiculous. Well, everything you cite on the website has to do with civil cases, has no application in criminal cases." So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're just going to talk about criminal cases, because recently, and I don't want anyone to think that I advocate the taking of drugs. I don't drink, smoke. I don't even take an aspirin. It's just not my thing. I just don't think that you should have stormtroopers coming, beating your house down, beating the doors down to your house in the middle of the night with machine guns, and because they're looking for drugs. Well, heaven forbid you should have a couple of ounces of cocaine or a few ounces of marijuana, or whatever drug you have. Oh, that's reason to have an armed raid on your house. So recently, the Department of Justice, which of course is, well, there's a word-to-lie ratio there of, I think it's 1-to-1. Recently, they've come out and say that the United States government incarcerates more people per capita than any other government. That there's over 2.2 million people in jail, and and according to the Department of Justice, over 20% of those people, which is almost 500,000, are in jail for drug charges. Non-violent drug offenses. And no, I don't consider the fact that somebody is selling marijuana with a handgun a violent drug offense. If he takes the gun out and shoots somebody or threatens, that's a different story. 20%. And if that's not outrageous, if that's not enough to just make your blood boil or say there's something seriously wrong here, then maybe this information is what you need. And when you find out that it's not just 500,000 people that are in jail for drug offenses, but when you find out, when you go through the legal end of it, and you find out there's no legal justification for those 500,000 people to be in jail, whoa, if that's not enough to make your blood boil and start taking action and to help these people, or to take some kind of non-violent action, then nothing will. 500,000 people, and there's several 100,000 on their way there now. Not even taking into account all the people that are murdered by police departments, police officers, when they go serve their no-knock warrants, and they bust into the wrong house, and they shoot whoever happens to be there. It happens all too often. You can just do a Google search and you can find out. So we're going to see, what are the legal grounds to say that all these drug charges are totally unfounded, that there's no legal basis whatsoever. What I like to do is, and I point out that I'm a babbling idiot, I'm not an attorney, and if you show this video to an attorney, more than likely they'll say Mark is an idiot, he's taking things out of context, he's reading things that have no application whatsoever, he's twisting words, he's just putting a spin on it. But if you go to my website, adventuresinlegalland.com, you can verify everything I'm saying. Then if you take that material to an attorney, they can accuse you. This is what attorneys do. See, a lot of people will go through and they'll see the information and say, well, if that's true, why aren't defense attorneys using this information to get their clients off of drug charges? Well, the reason is that the drug war, the so-called drug war, which is not a war on drugs, it's a war against people who use drugs, it's $1 trillion business. Okay, it's not just the prison system that's making billions and billions of dollars. It is the local prosecutors, it's the police departments. I don't even have the time to get into the forfeiture laws, where if the police department goes in and they can seize an entire house because it's being used as a meth lab, or legally under Bennis versus Michigan, United States Supreme Court has ruled for 200 years, if there's marijuana here, that all the property, the house, the property, regardless of who owns it, is all forfeited to the police department. Oh yeah, the state. But all that money stays with the police department. So they have a vested economic interest in the drug war, just in forfeitures alone. Which, if you look, the statistics from government, 7 out of 10 forfeiture cases never have charges filed. So think about that one. So what I don't want to do is I want to go through something that an attorney or a prosecutor or a judge, anyone who profits from the drug war is not going to go through this. But I want to see if someone's going to be convicted, what's the jurisdiction of the court? Well, how do you determine the jurisdiction of the court? Well, don't ask a judge, because they don't believe that their jurisdiction is limited at all, that they're these little gods that wear these black robes and they can do whatever they want. And that's true because they have the guns. But we're talking about the legal basis. And attorneys may turn around, or prosecutors or whatnot, they may turn around and say, oh, Mark is wrong, he's full of this. That's just not the way it's done. And you know what? They're absolutely right. This is not the way it's done. So, but this is the way the law reads. So keep that in mind when we start going through this. Now, if you look in the Declaration of Independence, which is supposed to be why this country was founded, it states that governments, and this is meaning American governments in particular, are, unlike the Russian government or the Chinese government, was founded for one purpose. That to secure these rights, the Declaration of Independence says, governments are instituted among men. Now this is restated for those skeptics, which is good, who may say, well, the Declaration of Independence has no legal bearing whatsoever. Well, is it wrong? Is that not why the government was established? Well, if it wasn't established to protect rights, then you need to start explaining something, especially since the whole basis of the power to tax is protection, that they're reciprocal. So let's look at why the government was created, and we'll look at the constitutions. The Constitution of New York, the original one, 1777, this is linked on my website in the standing cross-reference. They adopted the entire the New York Constitution adopted the entire Declaration of Independence as part of the Constitution. So to say it has no legal standing whatsoever is just ridiculous, unless, of course, the Constitution has no legal standing, but that's a whole other episode. So I'm going to read from Arizona. This is Article 2, Section 2. And when I go through, everything is on the website. So if I don't give you a citation, you can get on the website. You go to Article 2, Section 2 of the Arizona Constitution, and it says very clear and unambiguous. You don't need to be a Juris Doctor. You don't need to have a law degree. You don't need to be a practicing anything to understand this. Very simple, and if you've graduated 5th grade, you can understand this. It says all political power is inherent in the people. Yeah, that's a whole show. And governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and are established to protect and maintain individual rights. Let me read that again. Established to protect and maintain individual rights. Now, that's the government. So you have what they say there's 3 branches of government. You have the legislative, executive, and judicial parts of the government. All 3 branches are, if they have jurisdiction, which of course it's all a scam anyway, but for our purposes today, if they have jurisdiction, then it is limited, of course, to protecting and maintaining individual rights, because that's why the government was created. So this is what the jurisdiction of the court is going to be. The jurisdiction of the courts in Arizona and anywhere else, as you'll see it's all the same, is limited to protecting and maintaining individual rights. So, I'm going to move on to the court cases just to show that this is very consistent. The court cases are all consistent, the law is consistent, but in practice, we're going to see it's not. If it was consistent in practice, you wouldn't have 500,000 people in jail for drug offenses. You certainly wouldn't have people in jail for traffic offenses. You couldn't even have a traffic court.